Alright guys, welcome back to the Pocket Mads channel. It's Maddie here. Today, Wednesday, is the day that we normally cover a bunch of, kind of off meta decks, things that aren't necessarily super popular or common in the metagame, but did well recently in online tournaments. This is one of my favorite video series to do every week. Again, guys, we run our PMPT tournament series every Saturday, and this weekend is PMPT 19, so you should definitely go and register. Link down in the description below. But there's a bunch of other tournaments that other people host throughout the week that have a lot of awesome decks and examples of decks, and that's what we oftentimes do in today's video, is highlight those players and highlight those deck lists and those tournaments. So let's dive right into it. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Comment down below which one of these decks is your favorite. So the first deck that we're going to take a look at today is from the Illuchine Araco TCG Nuggy tournament, I guess is what it's called here. This is going to be Tusaze. I'm not really sure. He went 4-3-1. Some of these records are going to be better than others. I really just picked out decks that had winning records, at least, that were interesting. This is going to be Mega Gardevoir, but with Aegislash, and I find this to be very, very interesting. Again, I think Mega Gardevoir is a very strong Pokemon, even though maybe it's not the most well-positioned thing in the metagame right now, but there's a lot of, people are trying to figure out the best way to play Gardevoir, because there definitely seemingly is like one way that you're supposed to play it, and hasn't been too much deviation from that. So here's just one example of a deck list playing Aegislash to further boost the damage of Mega Gardevoir, and I really like it. We're still playing Meloetta. Now Meloetta only searches our deck for Psychic Pokemon, so it's a little bit counterproductive when you play it with Aegislash. But the cool thing about this Pokemon here is that it's going to increase the damage done by your Psychic and Metal Pokemon by 30 damage for each Aegislash that's on your bench. So the whole concept here is to utilize Mimikyu and Gardevoir as the attacking options and have them deal, 30 to 60 more damage every time they attack. And with things like Mimikyu, I think this actually has a lot of potential. And that's really why I wanted to highlight this deck list specifically, is because something like a Mimikyu, actually seemingly, because it's a basic Pokemon and a pretty decent attacker, and it has the really busted ability of Disguise, it does kind of make sense to maybe play it with something like an Aegislash, so that instead when we come in to hit for 70, we're actually hitting for 100, and because of the Disguise ability, we're able to get multiple attacks off almost guaranteed, which is really strong. So I think that there's something to this. Again, Mega Gardevoir here been put into a box immediately upon release. You're supposed to be playing it with Meloetta. You're supposed to be playing it with Diantha. They gave us the whole package for Gardevoir, and I really just wanted to highlight something that was kind of outside of the norm. We did include and talk about Gardevoir on our tier list yesterday. Again, it's a very strong deck, but it's got some very volatile matchups. So any expansion or I guess deviation of sort of that pre-built package that Dina built for us for Mega Gardevoir, I wanted to highlight it. So here's just one example here. Aegislash, Gardevoir. We still have one Sabrina, one Cyrus, one Copycat, and look at this double Ice Pop. So the healing that we're going to be doing in this deck, instead of playing things like Indeedee or Diantha, they're actually just playing Lucky Ice Pop, which is quite interesting. So I think Lucky Ice Pop's a broken card. We're likely going to see it a lot more moving forward, but here's just one example of a Gardevoir deck that I wanted to showcase. Next up, at the tournament number 9 is going to be Kira 32092 from France. They went 6-2 playing Mega Altaria, but they were playing it in an interesting way, which is going to be with Gourgeist and Meloetta, which is really cool. And again, a really decent example of how some of these new cards can actually change and affect the way that we build deck lists, right? Meloetta is a great example of that. Altaria is a deck that typically sees play with other 50 HP or lower Pokemon, and you use Lycia. I think it's Lycia to basically find those basic Pokemon out of your deck. That's our kind of primary draw support. Meloetta, I think, is really useful in these Psychic type decks if you wanted to play multiple Psychic type Pokemon that maybe don't all have 50 HP or lower, so you wouldn't be playing Lycia. So here's an example of double Meloetta, double Mega Altaria, but we're playing Pumpkaboo and Gourgeist here, which is pretty interesting. It does Soul Shot, 70 damage. You discard a card from your hand, and if you can't, this attack doesn't do anything. So you have to discard cards from your hand to use Gourgeist, but we're playing some extra Pokemon in the deck. We're playing extra Pokeballs, things like that. Double Stadium cards, this is going to further increase the damage that Gourgeist does. So this is a single energy attack cost with the Stadium. That's 80 damage, and that's really nothing to scoff at, right? 80 damage on 110 HP Pokemon. Meloetta to help draw through our deck list. It's going to deal with Oricorio very, very easily, which I think is one of the big upsides, quite frankly, to playing an Altaria deck like this. One of the biggest pitfalls of really any meta archetype for Mega Altaria is that it actually always tends to lose to Oricorio, and I think the main reason for that is that there's just not a lot of great Pokemon that you can easily, piece into the deck and have a good matchup into Oricorio, and I think that the Gourgeist stuff really kind of fixes that issue. So I find this very interesting. Of course, Peculiar Plaza is going to give Meloetta and Gourgeist all free retreat, which is cool. Jirachi for the bench damage. Now, when you play a deck like this, you are kind of foregoing the benefits of playing Chingling, which is, I think, still kind of the prominent way to play Mega Altaria. But again, guys, this is about sort of deviations. These are deck lists that aren't typically something that you would see, or, you know, haven't really caught on to be something popular in the metagame, but did perform well. 6-2 here. The matchups for this particular player here is that they beat double Hydreigons, actually, and then lost to one Hydreigon. Altaria typically does well into Hydreigon. Beat an Oricorio deck here, Greninja Oricorio. So if you're playing like Altaria, and you do get the win over Greninja or Oricorio, like that tells me enough that our deck is well built for that matchup. So I think this Gourgeist card, I don't actually remember when this came out. I think this might have actually come out in the new set. It's really not a bad card. It's basically like the stage 1 version of the Sableye that we have from a couple of sets ago that does see play in various decks. This just has more HP, but again, Meloetta helping you find all of these Pokemon pretty consistently. So definitely an interesting card, definitely an interesting way to play Altaria. And again, if Oricorio is ever something that you're really afraid of, which it might be if you're playing Mega Altaria, this Gourgeist card is going to be able to deal with Oricorio very, very easily, and I find that to be pretty cool. So there we go. It's also going to fill your bench spot, right? Because when you're playing Altaria, you got to play other Pokemon. That's how we deal the maximum damage with Mega Harmony. So why not kind of play something like this, right? And really boost your matchups into some other stuff. Again, no Chingling, so that is a bit of a downside, but there's a lot of matchups where Chingling's not going to help you, right? So keep that in mind. It will help you into Suicune and Greninja. It's going to help you into Hydreigon, so I do think Chingling's a really good card, but I wanted to highlight this because it was sort of a different style. Next up is going to be from the MLA Crew B2 Rapid number 3, and this is Pokebomb from Greece, and he went 10-4. I believe here he made it all the way to grand finals before losing to Mega Altaria and Chingling, but he was playing a Gengar deck with Mega Kangaskhan. This is a very fun deck. You might have already seen this in other people's videos because it made some waves in the community, but a really cool deck. So this is going to be Bother Gengar with Indeedee and Mega Kangaskhan, and I actually really like this. I think that Bother Gengar is actually one of the better Pokemon that we have in Pokemon Pocket, and I don't mean like a top tier Pokemon. I mean like when you consider all of the Pokemon that we have available to us, like Gengar, the Bother Gengar is actually a really good card, especially with Rare Candy. You can go turn 2 Gengar Bother, and then all of a sudden they cannot play any supporter cards, and that's a really big deal. That's going to stop a lot of different decks in their tracks. Definitely an important card for sure, and it's basically just a single prize attacker to help lead us into Mega Kangaskhan to finish the game. And again, that's a really big deal here. Mega Kangaskhan, 1 Lucky Ice Pop, 1 Indeedee. We're kind of keeping Kangaskhan alive as much as possible. And of course, we are still playing, we are playing Rocky Helmets to further boost the damage here. So the damage does add up. You know, if you do get this Gengar out early, I think a lot of people understand that it actually is a very valuable Pokemon. Only 50 damage, but 130 HP. Quite frankly, that's you know, not the easiest Pokemon to KO. You're actually living an attack from a lot of different things, and your opponent's unable to play supporter cards. If they don't get that research down, if they don't get those copycats out, they might not really move through their deck, and that's going to give you a very distinct advantage as you go into the late game, which is, you know, inherently one of the biggest upsides to Gengar. And again, the single energy attack cost gives us some wiggle room throughout the rest of the game to attach those extra energies to Mega Kangaskhan. And if we do lead Mega Kangaskhan, we have, of course, Ilima to scoop it up after it takes an attack. So sometimes that might be preferred, actually, to lead Kangaskhan if you, of course, do have Ilima in hand. Peculiar Plaza is going to give Indeedee and Gengar free retreats, so that's always nice for sure. 1 Mars as well, which I think pairs really well with Bother Gengar. 1 Cyrus, double Copycat, double Research, 1 Pokeball, double Rare Candy. Only 1 Pokemon in the deck is interesting, but we're only playing 4 basics, so, you know, it kind of does make some sense there at least. And yeah, nothing is like too crazy about this deck. Like realistically, it's a very like simple deck list in nature, but a couple of the decks in this video are very simple, but that doesn't mean they're not good. So again, I think Kangaskhan here, and we've said it so many times, this new Mega Kangaskhan card being colorless, being a basic Pokemon, means there's literally like an infinite amount of ways that we can play this Pokemon because it's so flexible. And I think that's definitely the big upside to Kangaskhan. I think that's why we're going to see a lot of it, maybe to its detriment, because one of the things that happens when it comes to like meta analysis and meta progression is that if a Pokemon sees play in a bunch of different decks, it never really rises to the very top. Like all of the decks at the very top of the metagame are very standardized in terms of the decks that we play those Pokemon in. Think Suicune, think Altaria, think Hydreigon. You know, all of those decks are, there's like one agreed upon way to play those Pokemon, which is the decks that they are seeing play in. So when you're seeing something like Mega Kangaskhan, it's going to be in so many different decks. There might be some pop-out appearances, but not one Mega Kangaskhan deck, at least in my mind, is really going to take over the metagame. So that is maybe one detriment to Mega Kangaskhan. I could be wrong about that. I definitely could be wrong, but it's just the way that it kind of goes for some of these colorless Pokemon. So I really like this deck. Shout out to this player here. Shout out to Pokebomb. Honestly, one of the more prominent players in the online tournament community. So shout out to him. And shout out to this Mega Kangaskhan Gengar deck, a very fun deck. And you can also attack with Indeedee, so don't sleep on Indeedee. It's actually also probably one of the best Pokemon in the game. I think that I've referenced it a couple of times, but the most played Pokemon throughout all online tournaments is Chingling, and then I think number 2 is in fact Indeedee. I think Indeedee is the second most played Pokemon in the game, which makes sense because it's valuable in so many different decks. But anyway, here you go. Bother Gengar, pretty cool. Next up from the same tournament here is going to be Seedax, and this is just one example. This Chandelure deck is popping off. Chandelure, I think is how you call it. I posted this deck list or an image of this deck on my community page on YouTube because it's actually been doing extremely well. As far as decks go, so far this season, this is actually one of the highest average win rate decks so far. It hasn't seen nearly as much play as some other decks, but it's really been kind of taking over, and it's a really, really interesting deck list. So 10-3 at this tournament. Again, made it all the way to top 4 and ended up losing to Pokebomb. Well, and you'll see why in a second. It was kind of a very unfortunate matchup for this particular player, but let's take a look here at the deck list. Now, this is going to be the new Chandelure, the Psychic type one. So it's got the attack your past friends, 2 Psychic Energy, 60 damage, and it does 20 more damage for each supporter card in your discard pile. And that may seem like it's a little underwhelming, but keep in mind, you're probably going to be playing supporter cards every turn. At least that's the hope. And that's how we've built this deck list. We're playing Double Research, Double Copycat, Alicia, Sabrina, PCL, Mars, and Red. These are cards that you can always play. And you'll notice we're not playing Cyrus in the deck, not even 1 copy, which is pretty crazy. And we're also playing 1 copy of Protective Poncho because, again, the whole strategy here is to play the new Meowth. This is the Carefree Steps Meowth, the one that has the immersive from Fantastical Parade. This is actually a really good card. So it kind of sits into the active spot, and it's got a 50-50 chance to never take damage when you attack it, which is really annoying. Quite frankly, as an ability, it's really, really strong. And its attack doesn't deal any damage. You do have to commit an energy to it, but its attack just draws a card. So effectively, we park Meowth in the active, and then we just draw cards, and we draw cards, and we draw cards. We're drawing, hopefully, our Pokemon, but we're also drawing, of course, our supporter cards. So every turn here, we let Meowth basically stall as long as possible while we play supporter cards, and then when we come into to Chandelure, we are then ready to start hitting for a lot of damage, right? If we kind of wait, if you go double Meowth, just for an example, and you wait maybe like 6 or 7 turns before you're forced into Chandelure, like all of a sudden, like this guy is hitting for like 200 damage or almost that, which is enough to just KO Pokemon. And that's the concept. That's literally the strategy with this deck, which is pretty funny. And even if you go 1 Meowth into Chandelure, into another Chandelure, there's still a lot of damage. This is all single prize Pokemon. So this deck is actually way more legit than you might think. Protective Poncho is there to keep these Chandelures on your bench without getting sniped and then brought up into the active. Again, we want to force our opponent to go through the Meowths. That's the whole concept here. We want to stall. We want to flip some coins, get a little bit lucky, have these Meowths be in the active for as long as possible so that when we come into Chandelure, we're just KOing everything. And that's, again, the entire concept for the deck. A very creative deck, a very slow burn deck. It's almost like a control type deck, but it's really not. It's just sort of a classic, mid-range, like late game sweeper deck. And I think that's really cool. It's just not something that I think a lot of people thought of. When I saw the Chandelure card, I don't know if I really thought much of it, but this strategy makes a ton of sense. So whoever came up with this deck originally, shout out to you because it's actually been doing very, very well. And I would actually encourage players to play this deck in a competitive setting. I don't think that this is like a one-off thing. I think that this could be a very valuable strategy in the metagame. And these sort of late game like sweeper decks, again, can utilize Protective Poncho. I think that's kind of the whole concept of Poncho, is to set up these really big Pokemon and keep them safe while they're on their bench, while they're on your bench, from getting hit by your Greninja and then brought up with Cyrus or something like that. So it's a very fun strategy, a very, very cool deck, very simple. Again, very, very simple strategy. And you'll see why this deck, of course, lost to Bother Gengar of all decks, because he had to get again, Bother Gengar doesn't allow Chandelure to play supporter cards, which is unfortunate, right? It's kind of funny that a deck list like this went all the way far into the tournament and then ended up playing a Bother Gengar in top 4. That is quite ironic, I would say. But yeah, this is a very, very good deck. Not many counters, quite frankly, other than something like a Bother Gengar, which is really funny. And yeah, I love it. We're playing 1 Licia because actually Litwick and Meowth have 50 HP. So that's another big upside, that this is actually just a fully Licia compatible deck list, which is really cool. Definitely one of my favorite decks that I've seen so far. Again, the players are always very creative, and I'm just sort of doing my job showcasing this deck to you guys. All right. Next up is going to be Amilaz from Turkey here. He was playing Victreebel and Chingling, also at the MLA B2 Rapid number 3, 8-2 8-2. This deck, this tournament had a bunch of really fun decks here, and it was a standard format tournament. And this is going to be Victreebel with Chingling, guys. Like, shout out to Victreebel, because this really is, you know, one of the all-timers in Pokemon Pocket. One of the OGs, I should say. Let's go ahead and take a look at the deck list here, and this is going to be the Fragrance Trap Victreebel, and it allows you to basically, if this Pokemon's in the active spot during your turn, you may switch one of your opponent's bench Pokemon to the active spot. So it's basically like a free Cyrus if you get Victreebel and it's in the active spot. But keep in mind, you know, this deck list does have some buffs to it, right? We can play Temporal Leaves, Celebi, which isn't a super new card, but it is actually a really relevant card in a deck like this, because if we don't have the ability to really just get over something with doing only 60 damage, well, then Celebi's able to maybe, you know, kind of take a KO on like a Mega Blaziken or something like that. Which is always pretty cool. So shout out to Celebi, because it is actually a pretty relevant card. Chinglings is going to slow your opponent down, not allow them to evolve their Pokemon, so Chingling pairs extremely well with Victreebel. Because we're playing Pokemon Flute, so like this is like a weird strategy that like does exist in Pokemon Pocket, but it's never really like come into the forefront of the metagame. And Pokeflute makes your opponent put a basic Pokemon from their discard pile onto their bench. And the reason this is relevant is because Victreebel does 60 damage. So the whole concept here is we go into Victreebel, we KO a basic, and then we bring it back with Pokeflute, and then we bring it up with Victreebel, and we repeat. And that's the whole concept of the deck list. 140 HP in Victreebel. Leaf Cape brings it to 170. 170, one Quick Growth Extract as well, a new card that allows us to kind of evolve our Pokemon a little bit more consistently. I actually really like the 2-1-2 lineup of Victreebel, double Rare Candy, double Research, double Copycat, double Pokeball, and one Quick Growth Extract. This deck is way more consistent than you might think it is. So I really like this deck. Again, it's going to have some bad matchups for sure. That's always going to be the thing with Victreebel, but it's also going to be a deck list that I think always has the opportunity to win, you know, and this is the type of deck, and really the last couple of decks that we've taken a look at here are really the #1 reason why I make videos like this. So let's go on a little bit of a tangent, because, you know, the metagame is always defined by what's popular. That's always the concept, right? Most of the time when you see decks winning, it doesn't just mean that the deck is good. Of course, if decks are winning tournaments, that means they're good, but also it means, just from a mathematical perspective, that is a popular deck list, right? When Suicune wins, when Hydreigon wins, when Altaria wins, the reason you see those decks win so often is not just because they're good decks, but because they're very popular decks. It's just what people play in a competitive tournament. So this video is all about highlighting decks that, you know, are really actually good deck lists. They're just not popular. And I think that that's always important to the metagame. We on our tier list yesterday, like we ranked like the top 20 decks or whatever, but there's a bunch of decks that, you know, just aren't really considered to be in the metagame that can still win games, which is why we do this video every week, to highlight decks like this. So shout out to this player here. Shout out to Amilaz 8-2. Shout out to Victreebel. Always a fun deck list. And again, I think Chingling is broken with Victreebel, and I think that Quick Growth Extract has made the deck a little bit better as well, which is always pretty fun. Next up is going to be Gosu, went 5-4, and this is Blacephalon. So the reason I wanted to highlight this, not because he had an incredible record in this one tournament, he did go 5-4, so it's a winning record, but this is Blacephalon, and I think that a lot of people just haven't really played this Pokemon. It just is something that I don't know if we've seen a whole lot of, which is a little disappointing. Spoiler, we are going to showcase Ninetales a couple of times in this video as well, because we forgot to put it on the tier list. Kind of. We'll talk about it. Anyway, this is Gosu's deck, and this is going to be Poison Barb, Blacephalon, Celesteela, so a full Ultra Beast deck list. So Celesteela does work here. And we're utilizing Flame Patch and Lusamine and Starting Planes to give all of these Pokemon extra HP. It's actually a really fun deck. And the reason it's fun is because status conditions do stack. If we're putting people, or if we're burning people rather, with Blacephalon, and then they attack us or Poison Barb us, then they're taking burn and poison damage. At least that's the way that I conceptualize this deck. And it's really cool. And again, Celesteela here can help stall. It can also deal some damage. This is a deck that's probably only playing Fire Energies, although I didn't actually check. Does this no, it doesn't show it. But I assume we're only playing Fire Energies, because why would we not with Blacephalon EX? And I think the whole concept with Blacephalon most of the time is that it's actually a good Pokemon, and it's a 2-prize Pokemon. So like, if forcing your opponent to go through double Blacephalons is actually a little bit more of an issue than you might think it is, especially since the 3 energy attack cost means that we can set up the second Blacephalon like very easily. I do suspect the Celesteela might be here for things like Oricorio, but again, if Oricorio attacks us, they're taking burn damage and they're taking poison damage, so it really does add up. Double Lucky Ice Pops with Starting Planes to keep Blacephalon alive even longer. We got Pokeballs, we got Researchers, we got Copycats, again, all of that good stuff. So I do kind of assume the strategy here, because I haven't played this deck myself, would be to kind of just lead Blacephalon and then put them, like burn them and then just attach and attach. And if we get KO'd, it's like, all right, whatever. But then we can go into Lucamine or go into our second Blacephalon, set it up with Lucamine, and then just go from there. You could also just sort of lead Celesteela until you can Moonbaton, and then, you know, after you get KO'd, just Lucamine into the second Blacephalon. So it's about chip damage, but it's also about carrying over into the late game. And Blacephalon deals 140 damage, which really does add up, especially when you combine all of the burn and poison chips. So it's actually a very interesting deck, something that I think should be considered. Not a way that I built Blacephalon, but it actually is a very creative way to play it. And I think it actually makes a lot of sense, right? The Nihilego stuff may seem like it makes the deck inconsistent, but Celesteela gives it free retreat. So if you lead Nihilego, it really doesn't matter because Celesteela is going to allow you to kind of go from Nihilego into Blacephalon whenever you want to, which is really nice. And of course, Nihilego Poison Barb is a ton of chip damage. Blacephalon itself actually burns your opponent with Singe, which is pretty cool. So it's a really creative deck, a really fun deck, and honestly, the only real Blacephalon deck that I've seen have some type of meta success so far this season. So shout out to Gosu, shout out to this deck list. I love it. It's really, really cool. And it's a very, like, it's an Ultra Beast deck, which I always love, but also it's just like a very different Ultra Beast deck. You know what I mean? It's just a very strange deck. I don't know what else to say, but I do love it. Next up is going to be Kuki. So Kuki, I don't know, from Argentina. We're going to highlight a couple of Ninetales decks because, again, I did not include Ninetales in the tier list yesterday, even though I put Ninetales on the thumbnail. I had a full intention of talking about Ninetales yesterday and including it on the tier list. But what I do is I go through the metagame tab on Limitless and I choose all of the decks that are seeing the most play. And I think Ninetales was like the 30th most played deck so far this season. So it just didn't like make the cut. You know, if a deck doesn't see enough play, I just don't really have enough data to justify or rather, you know, rank it in terms of like its, you know, viability in the metagame. So hopefully Ninetales sees some more play. We have two different Ninetales decks to take a look at. This is going to be Kuki's deck here from Umbreon, 99X Storm's Late Night Pop-Up. 5-3 record, again, from Argentina, Kuki. This is going to be Ninetales with Crawdaunt. And I really love this deck. Another deck that I did post on my community page, I think sometime last week. And it's a really, really cool deck because Ninetales is a very interesting Pokemon. And there's actually quite a toolkit that we have available to us now to play with Ninetales. And I think that this is sort of the way that we should be playing Ninetales. There's other ways to play it. You can play with Greninja, and then we'll have another example coming up. But Crawdaunt's a really slept on Pokemon. The Unruly Claw ability of Crawdaunt means that when you evolve your Corphish into Crawdaunt, you get to discard an energy from your opponent's active Pokemon, and that's actually quite strong. It's actually a really strong ability, especially when paired with Ninetales, which stops your opponent from attaching energies to the active. So we play Ninetales to stop our opponent from being able to attach to their Pokemon. We play Crawdaunt and Team Rocket Grunt to discard energies, and the entire concept of this deck list is to just sort of stick your opponent in the active spot so they can't attach energies and they can't retreat or attack, and then we just sort of KO slowly with Ninetales. Like, that's the whole concept for the deck. Training Area does boost the damage of Ninetales up to 90. We're playing one Sightseer in the deck to find all of these Stage 1 Pokemon because we are playing 4 of them in the deck list. One Cyrus, one Sabrina, double Research, one Copycat, double Pokeball. This deck's got everything in it that I kind of would like to see. So one Mantike as well. A deck list like this is really good, but unfortunately, like, there are there's just enough decks, I think, for like, it's tough for Ninetales because there's a lot of decks in the game that just play like infinite energy acceleration, right? Like, any deck playing baby Pokemon is going to be tough. You know, something like a Gardevoir, like, after it attacks, it's going to have plus like 5 energies onto it, so it's tough to kind of get that down on energies. Hydreigon is something that this deck should counter, but also like Hydreigon can come in and like kind of just KO you, so that's a bit of a factor as well. Magnezone and Oricorio is always going to be something difficult when you're playing a water-based deck like this. All your Pokemon, well, I guess Ninetales not weak to lightning, but either way, it's immune to, like, Oricorio is immune to Ninetales. And then Magnezone can just generate energies infinitely. So there's definitely some gaps in this strategy in terms of its like meta viability, but I think that this deck is actually really well built. Like, I think they have everything in the game to make Ninetales like a real strategy, which is why I like it. You know what I mean? Because it feels like it's got all of these really nice pieces from all of these different sets, and they all come together to make a really cohesive strategy in a deck list that's unique in the metagame. This is a unique type of deck, which is pretty cool. Well, I guess we have Banette. Banette does the same thing, but you wouldn't play like Crawdaunt Beta, you know what I mean? So Ninetales does make some sense here. I do like it. Mantike, because why not, right? It's just a good leadoff Pokemon. There's Ninetales. There it is. There's Crawdaunt Ninetales. So go ahead. Shout out to Kuki. I love it. I just wanted to highlight it again. I apologize for missing it on the tier list yesterday. More people should play Ninetales because I think it's a fun inclusion, and it brings a lot of diversity to the metagame to have a deck like this. But next up is going to be Boat Swan from the Storms Mega Standard. Yo, guys, this is Crabominable EX. Yo, shout out to Crabominable, one of my favorite guys in the entire game. Saw a tiny bit of play when this card released, but then fell quickly into meta irrelevance. But Crabominable is kind of slept on, and we'll talk about that. So this is going to be Boat Swan from the United States, 6'3" and 1. Crabominable with Indeedee and Mega Kangaskhan. That's right, I love this. Crabominable has 160 HP. Guys, this Pokemon is not bad. I don't know how else to describe to people. I've always told people Crabominable is a good card. It's basically the water type Executor, which again, I also think is a very slept on card. These Pokemon have a ton of support. The stage 1 Pokemon and Executor, predominantly, I think is absolutely broken because it's kind of the same thing but grass, but we have quick growth extract. So that's beside the point. But Crabominable here does 40 damage, and then during your next turn, it does 40 more. So you only hit for 40 for only 1 energy, but then on the following turn, you deal 80. So 160 HP with Heavy Helmet, that's kind of broken. Lucky Ice Pops and Indeedees to keep this thing up and running, and we're just kind of chipping for 80, but it's only 1 energy, so we can attach all of those extra energies to Mega Kangaskhan to finish the game. It's actually a strategy that makes a whole lot of sense to me. Yet again, you could play this strategy very, very similarly to how you, you could just play Executor in here and then just play Quick Growth Extract or something. Yeah, I really do love it. It's a really, really fun deck. Now, the only thing with this deck is that, of course, you don't really want to lead Indeedee, but it's not the end of the world if you go second, I suppose. If you lead Kangaskhan, we do have Illiman in the deck. We've been seeing that more and more often. 1 Cyrus, 2 Pokeball. Double Poncho. And I think a deck like this kind of does also rely on Poncho, right? Because Greninja still exists, so we Poncho an Indeedee, and then we Poncho the Kangaskhan so that they just can't get brought up in the active. That's the concept for the deck list. But a ton of HP here to have to go through a Crabominable EX with Heavy Helmet and Indeedees and a Kangaskhan. It's kind of one of those Exodia type decks where it's how am I possibly how am I going to go through this much HP? It really is kind of a tough thing to ask. You're just attacking so many times, and every time you attack, they're going to heal for 40, 60, 80 damage, and it's minus 20 because of Heavy Helmet. So there's a lot to talk about here. Again, Crabominable, definitely slept on Pokemon right now with Heavy Helmet. I think Executor can also use Heavy Helmet, which is kind of broken, although it has access to Leaf Cape, so maybe that's a little bit different, but I like Heavy Helmet because Heavy Helmet works with Crab and also Kangaskhan, so it's kind of like a double-edged sword there. I love the deck. I love Crabominable. I really do. And again, a pretty decent record. So again, Pokemon like this, I think, have been buffed. We have Sightseer, Executor. I've been talking about, I don't know why I keep talking about Executor, but it's basically the same card as Executor. Executor has Quick Growth Extract, but you could play Sightseer in a deck like this. It's just a really fun strategy. A really, really fun deck that I think a lot of people are kind of sleeping on, quite frankly. So shout out to Boat Swan for his deck list. I love it. Next up is going to be Gengar Grin from the Rapid Random Pop-Up, B2 number 3. Gengar Grin, the United States, Lunala, guys. You guys remember Lunala? Do you guys remember this card? This card actually has been buffed pretty dramatically. This is so funny because I talked about this on the Pocket podcast a little while back. I was like, yo, we have Peculiar Plaza, we have Mimikyu. This kind of all works with Lunala pretty well, which is pretty funny. And somebody built the deck and actually did pretty well with it in a tournament. So I wasn't crazy, okay? I wasn't out of my mind. Lunala is definitely an interesting card for sure. I kind of maybe would want to play Meloetta in this deck just to kind of move through these Pokemon and draw them more often. But we're playing Xerneas to get around things like Oricorio. But yeah, so if you don't know what Lunala does, the Psychic Connect ability allows you to move your Psychic energies from one of your bench Pokemon to your active Pokemon. So it's basically you can just move those energies however you want. If you're playing all Psychic Pokemon and Psychic energies, then yeah, that's how it works. But this works really well with Peculiar Plaza because we can just retreat for free into a new Psychic Pokemon and then move the energies to that new Pokemon. So we never have to worry about it. Really, really cool. This strategy always kind of got shut down a little bit by the whole Cyrus stuff because if you take an attack and you retreat, they can just Cyrus you back up, and the whole strategy doesn't make a ton of sense. It does help conserve energies, but they're still able to take prizes. Mimikyu has changed things a little bit. Peculiar Plaza and Mimikyu is interesting because you could go into Mimikyu attack, take a hit, take 0 damage. Take 0 damage because of the disguise ability, and then just retreat for free into Lunala or Giratina or a second Mimikyu, and then move the energies and just do it again. So Mimikyu's kind of giving you a couple of free attacks in this whole Lunala strategy. There's a lot of pieces to the puzzle. Giratina is here because it does big damage, but also generates additional energies, which we can then move to whatever Pokemon we want. I really love this deck. I really love the concept here. I know it's kind kind of a meme, and I think a lot of the people still thought I was memeing, but yeah, I mean, Psychic Connect Lunala with Mimikyu and Giratina, Peculiar Plaza, it's a real strategy. This is a real thing in the game that, again, if you play it, like, you might lose to it. Like, it's not that bad. Again, 6-2 in this tournament here, a very respectable record. We lost to Hydreigon, that makes sense, and we did lose to Suicune and Greninja, which, again, kind of makes sense, but maybe you play Protective Poncho in here. Is there space for Poncho? Probably not, now that I realize it. But if you could play Poncho in this deck, then maybe that's fine. Maybe you could cut the Xerneas and maybe just cut one other thing, you know, lose the Oricorio matchup, hope you whiff it, but then just play Poncho so they can never Cyrus you up or damage you or whatever. Like, that sounds really fun to me. So a strategy like this actually makes a ton of sense. I wanted to highlight it because some absolute mad lad actually brought it to the tournament and popped off. So again, shout out to Lunala. Definitely one of my favorites here in the video. Next up is going to be Moki 2510 from the Daniel C. Mini $100 or $10 US dollar tournament. 6-4. This is one of the other ways to play Ninetales, like we talked about, right? You could play it with, you know, like Crawdaunt, like we talked about. You could play it with Greninja, but this is going to be a way to play it with Araquanid, which is yet another, like, funny Pokemon that is, like, so fringe meta and has been for so long. Araquanid is not a good Pokemon, but it does enable Lana, which is a broken supporter card. This is Cyrus, except the Pokemon that you bring up doesn't have to be damaged. All you need is Araquanid in play. And it doesn't have to be on the or on the active. It can just be on your bench. So now we can play Ninetales, but as long as we can go into Araquanid, we can actually just sort of choose to Lana up whatever Pokemon we want to target without having to sort of discard energies and rely on, like, the Crawdaunt discarding and Team Rocket Grunt. So again, a very valuable strategy. Inflatable Boat does give a -1 retreat cost to these Pokemon. Unfortunately, they both have a retreat cost of 2, which kind of feels tough, but Training Area yet again to buff the damage of Ninetales. And we are playing a Sightseer because we're playing double stage 1 Pokemon. So again, it's just another way to play Ninetales. I don't know if it's, like, fully as, like, conducive as, like, the Crawdaunt deck is, but this definitely has a ton of potential. The only thing I don't love about this deck is that, like, of course, like, you can only use Lana twice, and you have to have Araquanid and have Lana. So it's a little bit different, whereas, like, the Crawdaunt version, like, you can have Crawdaunt and not have, like, Team Rocket Grunt, or you can have Team Rocket Grunt and not Crawdaunt. Like, so it's a little bit different in that sense. This is a deck that does rely, like, on a 2-card combo, but very, very strong and a very unique deck list. So again, a couple of ways to play Ninetales. You could just play Greninja Cyrus as well. So that's the other sort of way that people also play it, but that's seen a little bit less play. So I just wanted to highlight this because there are a couple of ways people are playing Ninetales. I do think Ninetales is a very interesting card, so there you go. Next up is going to be Jacob J from PMPT 18 this past weekend, who did make day 2, went 7-3, did make it into our second day of competition, playing Vivillon Rillaboom. Yeah, this is not something I think a lot of people maybe realized. I don't know if we showcased this on the live stream this weekend. We probably did. Shout out to Taj and Jay Dankus. But here's the deck list here, and this is going to be, again, like kind of a Turbo Vivillon stuff with Pichu as a leadoff option, and then we're playing Captivating Rhythm Rillaboom, which is a stage 2 Pokemon, which yet again has the same, like, Cyrus type ability, I believe. Yeah, it's basically like the same. It's just Cyrus. It's every turn you have access to this. It's like Umbreon, but it's a stage 2 Pokemon, so it's a little bit awkward to get out. But we are able to play, you know, Lissia, Copycats, Double Rare Candy, and Double Quick Growth Extract to kind of move and evolve these Grass type Pokemon a little bit more consistently, which is pretty cool. Vivillon here has 130 HP, that's 160 with Leaf Cape, and your opponent's active Pokemon is now poisoned and asleep. So this is like an RNG status condition deck, but what's really funny is that we can just sort of bypass things and bring whatever we want up in the active, hit for 60, and then poison and sleep them, which is, again, like a kind of funny strategy. So if your opponent is forced to kind of go through double Vivillon and break through sleeps over and over again, with the ability to kind of have Vivillon target like whatever Mega Pokemon you might bench or anything like that, it's actually a pretty interesting strategy. With Leaf Cape, we're actually living in a hit from Hydreigon, and we're hitting for weakness, which is relevant. P2 allows us to get this up on turn 2, which is pretty funny. Spupa's got a really interesting attack, so Signs of Evolution. Basically, it doesn't deal any damage, but if you do use this attack, you can just immediately evolve into Vivillon, which is pretty cool. So you can kind of bypass that a little bit. But yeah, not a deck I think that a lot of people had their eyes on. But again, this past weekend at PMPT 18, you got to keep in mind, like, everyone was playing Hydreigon. So a grass status condition RNG based deck like this, like, actually probably kind of went off, and he probably KO'd. We can check, actually. Let's check his matches here. Okay, not that crazy. He did beat double Hydreigon and actually lost one to an Obstagoon. Oh no, he did play an Absol Dusk Noir deck, which, you know, probably does make some sense. Ended up losing to Suicune here, and yeah, lost to double Suicune. So that's probably going to be a tough one for sure for this deck, but very, very cool. One of my favorites of this past weekend, so we had to highlight it. So big shout out, of course, to Jacob J and your awesome Vivillon Rillaboom deck. You know, I love it when people bring decks like this to the tournament, because when they do make it into day 2, like, they're gonna get featured, you know, in these Wednesday videos. So it's really, really fun. Lastly, it's gonna be Chiha Ratsure from Japan, also at our tournament this past weekend. And he was playing Tyrantrum and Snorlax EX. This is, I think, the only Tyrantrum deck that I've seen have any sort of a decent run in online tournaments. And I could be wrong about that. 6-3 did make day 2 yet again as well. Pretty impressive here. And this is just Tyrantrum, guys. This is literally Tyrantrum with Snorlax as the front line. You're guaranteed to lead Snorlax with this deck, which is hilarious, because we're not playing any other basics. We're playing fossils. So the whole concept here is to just sort of let Snorlax go. Maybe you Ilima it up after it takes damage. It's just there to stall. It's just going to sit there and wait. Now, again, a deck that does utilize Protect the Poncho, because as we know, you know, when you're setting up a bench Pokemon, strategies like this never had a shot until Poncho. So I know some people are kind of undervaluing Poncho, excuse me, but in this video, I think we're seeing a very like a theme for how we should be playing Poncho, and I think that's kind of how we did it. We showcased a Gyarados deck that played Poncho earlier, I think it was Monday, so we've seen a couple of decks in this video playing Poncho, and I think this is how you play Poncho, is like you use it so that you can set up a late game strategy on the bench without just losing games outright sometimes to like Greninja and whatnot, which is always pretty fun. So, you know, double Job Fossil here, rare candies. We have red card in the deck, which you gotta love the red card, you know, throw it in there. A Lily as well to keep Tyrantrum alive, because Tyrantrum has a retreat cost of 3 and 150 HP. So like once you do go into Tyrantrum, you're probably living a hit, minus 20 from Heavy Helmet, plus of course, you know, the Lily to heal 60. Like maybe we live 2 hits from Tyrantrum. Now, if you don't know what Tyrantrum does, if you don't have less Pokemon in play than your opponent, it does 180 damage. 180. And that's not that hard of a condition to satisfy. It's pretty easy to do that. You play it just like you're seeing right now with Snorlax. And if whether Snorlax gets KO'd or you just scoop it up with Ilima, all of a sudden the only Pokemon in play is Tyrantrum, and you might be able to just sweep through your opponent. And I find that to be very interesting. We're even playing 1 copy of Red to hit over to you know, a 200 HP range there, which is pretty crazy. Not gonna lie, double research, double copycat. The only thing about fossils right now, the only downside to any fossil is that they do get shut down by Chingling. So like that's the premier factor here, is that Chingling's going to stop you from being able to bench an item card, which does include Jaw Fossil. So that's one downside to playing the fossils, but also we don't have any like real fossil support. We don't have any fossil search. I do think it's coming. They keep releasing new fossils. So there's got to be something in the future that buffs fossils specifically. Again, I'm a little bit afraid of that, quite frankly. Hopefully Chingling is enough of a counterbalance, but if they do give us fossil search or like fossil support, I'm going to be terrified of it, quite frankly, because Rampardos is still in the game, and now we have Tyrantrum, which is like Rampardos like ramped up to 11. This thing's terrifying to me. I'm absolutely terrified of Tyrantrum. So if this thing becomes metagame, we're all in deep trouble. That's for sure. But a very fun, very unique deck list. Again, day 2 participant here at an 800 player tournament this past weekend. Shout out to everybody that participated. Shout out to the judges and everyone that makes the tournaments happen, you know what I mean? Because like it's really fun and I really do love it. So anyway, shout out to Chiha Ratsure from Japan, playing the only player to make day 2 at any of these tournaments, at least I've seen so far, with Tyrantrum, which is pretty fun. And there we go, guys. That's the video. Don't forget to register for PMPT number 19 this weekend. Link down in the description below. And yet again, guys, don't forget to like and subscribe. I really appreciate all of the support. Like the community's been popping off ever since B2 Fantastical Parade came out, and honestly, the meta's been really fun. It's a very fun time to play Pocket. Ranked comes out in exactly 1 week, so that's always fun. When Ranked comes out, it'll be possibly a good time as well, and the meta game will, I think, continue to develop. So comment down below. Let me know what you think of all of these deck lists here. Shout out to all of these players. Shout out to all of these tournaments. And everybody, shout out to you watching. So there it is. That's the video. All right, guys. Peace out. Have a good one. We'll see you guys later. And yeah. Bye.